California's liberal politicians are passing laws that put the interests of sex offenders over the interests of protecting our children. Coming up, I'll tell you the latest reckless and dangerous legal proposals that they've advanced and how you can help fight back to protect children from sex predators. I'm Carl DeMaio, chairman of Reform California, and there is a dangerous pattern happening at the California legislature relating to sex offenders. We've seen over the years people get more aware of the risk, the threat that sex offenders pose to children and at-risk individuals in our communities. There have been a number of laws passed nationwide in the past 25 years that recognize that sex offenders tend to develop a habit, a pattern, and that's why we should monitor them. There's something called Megan's Law that puts sex offenders onto a registry, a public registry, so that people can monitor them and make sure that they're not engaging in any suspicious conduct. In addition to that transparency, many states have enacted laws limiting where sex offenders can work, live, where they can loiter. And that, again, is designed to keep them away from children and other sensitive members and compromised members of our community. But in California, there's a reversal of that trend. In California, the liberal politicians, they actually are saying that sex offenders have rights too. And if you see the pattern of legal developments and laws that have been passed by these liberal politicians, they are making the sex offenders they're giving the sex offenders more rights. They're restoring rights to sex offenders. They're removing restrictions on sex offenders. So let's go through what is actually happening. In California, there were several laws that required that sex offenders would have to register, mandatory registration, even on their first offense. And 2 years ago, liberal Democrats proposed Senate Bill 145, SB 145. What does it do? SB 145 changed California's mandatory sex offender registry requirements, stating that a judge no longer has to mandate that a sex offender be placed on a sex offender registry even if they molest a child as young as age 14. Age 14. Sex offenders could engage in sexual molestation with a child as young as age 14 and not be required to register as a sex offender. SB 145 is insanely dangerous. It is completely inappropriate, but it passed and is now the law in the state of California. It was sold as a bill to defend, you ready for it? LGBTQIA rights. And I looked into this. I said, well, what does this have to do with the gay community? And the media continued to say, oh, no, this is a pro-LGBT bill. And nobody in the media asked the Democrats, why are you saying somehow that LGBT rights have anything to do with molesting children as young as age 14? That question was never asked, never answered. It was just presented as a pro-LGBT bill when, in fact, SB 145 the only changes there dealt with mandatory sex offender registry and said, well, a judge does not have to require it. Even if a child is as young as 14, the judge doesn't have to require it. Any younger, I guess they do have to require it. But age 14 is still too young for a minor to consent to any sort of sexual intercourse with an adult. The theory was, and this is disgraceful, that some members of the LGBT community start experimenting at a young age and that adults experiment with them. I'm not joking about this. This is the whole nexus to LGBT issues and SB 145. And you know what? I've talked to gay community members As a gay Republican myself, I'm offended because they're trying to say that somehow gays are interested in young kids. It is reckless, it is inappropriate, and it is dangerous, but it is now the law in the state of California, SB 145. Now, this comes after a number of legal challenges to California's sex offender laws that have been put in place over the years. Several lawsuits have been filed to try to weaken the restrictions on sex offenders. For example, we have passed local laws that say that sex offenders cannot loiter anywhere near schools, playgrounds, churches, daycare centers. They can't live within a certain distance. Those laws have been challenged, and then politicians have decided to not enforce or walk away from those laws. Again, this is part of the scam that the left engages in. It's called sue and settle. Politicians invite a left-wing group to file a lawsuit, and then they use that as a justification to tell voters, well, we had to take the law off the books, or we don't enforce that law because it was the subject of a legal complaint. Well, you didn't actually fight that lawsuit in court. You used it as window dressing to embrace or adopt a bad policy that voters would be upset about. And the media gives these liberal politicians cover. They don't ask the question, why did you not defend against the lawsuit? Or why not go to the next step, which is put an amendment in the state constitution to clarify that no, lawsuits are not allowed to undo these restrictions. Look, there's a reason why we have restrictions and registry requirements on sex offenders. There's a lot of data, a lot of science to bolster that people who engage in sexual misconduct with minors, people who engage in predatory sexual conduct, tend to do it time and time again. That's why you restrict where they are. That's why you put them on a registry, so that you can be aware that there's a risk in the community and monitor those people more carefully. People say, well, people have a right to privacy just because someone has a mistake. The interests of protecting our children is far greater than any sort of, well, let people have a second chance. We let people have a second chance. They're not behind bars, but while they're still out in the community, people need to be aware that this person at one point did engage in this behavior, which means that there's a higher risk profile for them to engage in the behavior again. I want to urge you, if you live in the state of California, to check out the Megan's Law website. Go to meganslaw.ca.gov, meganslaw.ca.gov, and you can type in your address and find where people who are sex offenders are registered. I want to bring up this website and type in the city of El Cajon, and you can take a look at a map that shows a bunch of blue dots. And these are sex offenders, registered sex offenders. And I don't want to, say that, these people are somehow going to reoffend. I'm just saying that they are registered sex offenders, and you can then click on their profile and know their name and where they live, so that you can be aware. The red dots are offenders in violation. Those are folks that are particularly bad actors that you have to be more careful about. Let me go to this Borrego Springs area. Borrego Springs, if you notice, has two yellow dots. Those are SVPs, sexually violent predators. Sexually violent predators are a different category of sex offender. They are the worst of the worst. They are people who have habitually offended, and that the experts have examined their case, have actually examined the offender, and have determined that they are not just possibly going to reoffend, but they will reoffend. At some point, they will reoffend, and they're supposed to be carefully monitored. Unfortunately, in the state of California, the politicians have allowed a number of weak practices for monitoring of sex offenders and sexually violent predators in particular, and releasing them into residential communities, even with homeschoolers in the immediate area. Now, judges are supposed to review this. We've led at Reform California a number of campaigns to block the placement of sexually violent predators, and we've succeeded. But in other cases, we've not been able to convince the judge to withhold the placement. So this has been like whack-a-mole, trying to figure out how to marshal public opposition to the placement of a sexually violent predator. The problem, though, that we're seeing time and time again is that we have contractors working for the state of California not doing their jobs. One of them is Liberty Healthcare. Liberty Healthcare has repeatedly promoted the placement of sexually violent predators under a state contract paid for by taxpayers. And we have found that their work is quite lacking in terms of the placement, the reviews that they do. We have found that they've misrepresented things to landlords who they line up to rent homes to sexually violent predators. And so we really do believe that a whole entire overhaul is needed in how the state of California places sexually violent predators. I frankly think that they should not be placed in any residential community, but rather should be in the parking lot of state correctional facilities instead. I will close on this, and that is the movement in California could spread nationwide because there is a perverted, twisted, misguided approach to reviewing and viewing sexual predator activity. Take a look at this book hosted on Rutgers University. A well-known university in this country is hosting this book on their website. It's called A Long Dark Shadow: Minor Attracted People and Their Pursuit of Dignity, written by Alan Walker, or Ellen Walker, who knows? I don't have the personal pronouns on this fella or lady. But take a look at the content here. Minor attracted people, we would call those pedophiles. And it says their pursuit of dignity? What the hell are you smoking? Pursuit of dignity, these people are predators. They're pedophiles. Do not normalize this sort of conduct and behavior. And that gets us back to the beginning. SB 145 normalizes sex with 14-year-old kids by adults. This is happening in California. This is law in California. So when people say, oh, this minor attracted people theory, it's only a fringe group. Well, in California, it's the law, okay? They have written a law based upon this crazy concept. So I urge you, don't assume that this sort of perverse thinking will just be isolated in California, or that this perverse thinking won't spread even within the state of California, other areas. Help us by going to the website stopsexualpredators.org. That's our campaign site dedicated to improving and strengthening laws against sexual predators in the state of California. Go to stopsexualpredators.org, check out that site, contribute, share the stories, join the campaign. Thanks for watching. Help us break through the censorship of the liberal media by liking this video, sharing it with your friends, and subscribe to my YouTube channel.